Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our strategic conversation today with Ifenwa Ogochukwu. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the Tony Elumelu Foundation in Lagos. And the foundation, as you know, is a leading champion of African entrepreneurship across the continent. Ifenwa, thank you so much for joining us from Lagos, from your home in Lagos. I'm in Brussels. We're still in lockdown here, semi-lockdown, as we're sort of easing some of the restrictions. As you know, Ifenwa, we have a very strong Africa program, and in the last few years, last few months, we've been deepening and enhancing our work on Africa. And of course, you were at our Africa Summit last year, in June actually, when we could still travel. And you came to our Africa Summit to talk about the power of digital technology in improving the lives of African people. And I remember a very strong statement that you made when we were there, which was really to say, you know, in Africa, we don't need handouts, we need a hand up in our way to digital freedom, empowerment, and growth and development. So that was a very strong statement that I think impressed us all. And that's one of the reasons we brought you here to talk to us about what COVID-19 is doing to Africa, its growth and development prospects. Now, as we've all heard about the economic devastation and the impact on the health systems that COVID-19 is wreaking across the world, really, but also in Africa. And we've talked a lot about that. And, you know, the IMF has said not any country will be spared. The One campaign came out recently and said that access to food would once again become a problem across the world, but also in Africa. But I wanted to talk to you about the social impact, the societal impact that COVID-19 lockdowns and the lockdown on the economy is having on people in Africa. And before we start that conversation, I'd like to just say to all of those who are joining us that if you have questions and comments for us, please go to Twitter and it's hashtag FOE debate. So please do engage with us. And I'd like to now turn to you, Ifenwa, and ask you a very simple question, really, about how your life and the life of your organization has been impacted by COVID-19. How are you adjusting to the current environment, and how are you adjusting the focus of your work given the devastation and the havoc being played by COVID-19 on the economies and societies of Africa? Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with the team. And as you rightly said, it's the new normal, and that's what we're all seeing in terms of the work from home that the COVID-19 pandemic has imposed on all of us, the length and breadth of the globe. In terms of Africa, there's no continent that's been left behind. We started quite slowly in terms of the numbers, in terms of the number of cases that we had. In fact, I happened to be in Europe second week in March, and I left Nigeria thinking, you know, this is not an African problem, you know. There was a lot of misinformation, which sometimes still exists. And by the time I came back 5 days later, Belgium, Brussels, where you are, was in lockdown. And we had, you know, the very next week, we started our lockdown. So it has changed life as we know it. Since third week in March, we've been working from home, and everything's changed. We know that particularly what we're seeing is that the pandemic has revealed the underbelly of Africa, which is that in addition to the pandemic, to the COVID pandemic, Africa has been battling a hunger pandemic for over, 5-6 decades. And that's because as soon as the lockdown happened, the first thing that we noticed was insecurity. And why was there insecurity? There was insecurity because you were asking people to remain in their homes who depended on our daily activity and our daily movements for their food, for their income. So most Nigerians, and I'm sure most Africans, the lockdown was inconceivable because lockdown meant having to stay home hungry. They did not have any savings. They did not have any food stored. In fact, no fridges to store the food. And so they literally took to the streets. The palliatives from the governments helped, but it showed us the fact that inequality is a very real problem, not just in Nigeria, not just in Africa, but across the globe, because we're seeing the food lines, even in the United States, going on for hours, because people live paycheck to paycheck. People are not able to live if they are not earning. And that is what the pandemic has revealed to us. And so we need to really begin to look at our systems, our economic systems. We have emphasized a financial economy more so than a real economy. The focus should be on people, on human capital, on jobs, on productivity, as opposed to financial markets. And so this is a unique opportunity for the whole world to rethink and reimagine the future we want for our children. I dare say that this pandemic is the slightest catastrophe that the world could face, and look at what devastation it has wreaked. So we need to ensure that we come out of this with very important lessons learned in order to create a future that is resilient, a future that is sustainable. And the first port of call is food security for Africa and food security for the globe.
Thank you very much indeed. I think you've made some very, very important points there, actually revealing the inequalities that have existed, but are now actually becoming worse. So Ifenwe, I wanted to talk to you about another inequality, and that's about gender inequality and the importance of bringing the gender lens into when we look at economic development, growth, and sometimes we forget it. And as we start moving, hopefully towards a recovery, hopefully a green and sustained recovery, we shouldn't forget that the women are involved, and we shouldn't be gender blind. So tell me a little bit about how women have gone through this rather, let's say, strange and very challenging moment, and how you foresee that changing, or perhaps bringing that gender lens and that gender emphasis into the recovery process.
Well, I will talk first of all from my personal experience as a woman. Being in the office environment, you can absolutely put on your executive cap. You throw yourself into your work, and there is full focus, full attention. But as a woman, I'm now working from home, and I see that I have to wear many hats all at once. I have to wear my tutor cap. I have to wear my mother cap. I have to wear my CEO cap, and this shows that from a gender perspective, the pandemic clearly has had more of an effect on women, not just in the fact that we have to juggle a lot more, but when you think about the fact that women in Africa particularly make up 90% of the workforce. They earn less than 50% of the income and own less than 10% of the property. So with the liquidity crisis and with the impact of the pandemic on the economy, women will clearly have more adversely affect women than men. And so we need to bear this in mind. Recent news reels from Sierra Leone, for instance, has shown that because women, young girls, are no longer in school, there have been a spike in pregnancies. And so we need to ensure that we particularly pay mind to the gender lens to make sure that we protect the girl child at this time, not just to keep her safe, but to ensure that her education is safeguarded. And of course, from the economic point of view, to make sure that we ensure access to finance for women on the same level that their male counterparts have it. We know that there is a major finance gap for women's access to finance, and this pandemic needs to ever more emphasize to us the importance of ensuring that women have the same access to finance, the same access to markets, the same access to opportunity that men do. Because a woman, if you empower a woman, you empower a nation, and she's more vulnerable than her male counterpart. So now more than ever, we must ensure that all the initiatives rolled out by governments, by private sector, by development organizations are inclusive and have a particular focus on gender issues to ensure we protect women and give them the opportunities that they need to come out of this pandemic stronger, because they are the backbone of the economy. And if we support them and ensure that they recover, the economy will recover even faster across Africa.
Absolutely. And I hope that all those who are from these sectors, from business, from NGOs, and the policymakers from Europe and Africa that are listening to this strategic conversation, I do hope that this message gets across, because what you've said is absolutely crucial. Years of growth and development and years of progress cannot be set back. In fact, this should be an opportunity, as you said, Fenwa, for a great leap forward in terms of recognizing women's role in economic recovery, but also in politics and in society. So thank you for making that, giving us that very strong message. Let's move on. We don't have much time. I wanted to talk to you about the core business you're in, which is really promoting, nurturing, and developing entrepreneurship across Africa, especially among young people. But let's talk about the role of these entrepreneurs as we move, hopefully, towards a global recovery. What role can these entrepreneurships, these small businesses, what role can they play for this sustained recovery we're hoping for?
I think even before the pandemic, it was a well-established fact that sustainable economic development is impossible without the small and medium enterprises. We know that they are the ones that create jobs. All the major economies of the world have 70–80% of the jobs created by the SMEs. So any unemployment that we have in Africa, and ensuring that the burgeoning youth population in Africa have jobs 10, 20, 30 years from now, it all boils down to our ability to build a strong and robust small and medium enterprise sector. Even more so now with the pandemic, we've seen entire sectors, entire industries ground to a halt. The airline industry, the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, the events industry. And so more than ever, we need to emphasize the role that entrepreneurs bring, which is innovation. Entrepreneurs, what makes you an entrepreneur is that you see a problem and you innovate and you creatively find a solution to that problem. So this is the time for us to support and empower entrepreneurs. And that is why our emphasis in the foundation has always been on the digital economy. Everything has gone digital. Right now, school, education, business, work, everything is digital. So that shows us the role that technology has in ensuring that entrepreneurs innovate and create solutions that will solve the problems that not just the pandemic has brought, but all the other problems that we see in Africa. And so at the foundation, we continue to empower entrepreneurs. We have webinars that we have going on 2-3 times a week, encouraging entrepreneurs that you may be sitting at home because of a lockdown, but it doesn't mean that work stops. It doesn't mean that your creativity stops. It doesn't mean that your innovation stops. We need to give entrepreneurs the opportunity through funding, through training, through mentoring, and access to markets to ensure that the economy recovers and the economy is where we want it to be post-pandemic. And we've been working with all our development partners, from the UNDP to Africa Development Bank, to ensure that we continue to empower entrepreneurs at this time, especially entrepreneurs in the health sector. With the global scarcity of private personal protective equipment, we know that we cannot depend on the international supply chains, and we need to look inward, and we need to increase investments in the manufacturing sector. And that's what we've done. We've galvanized our entrepreneurs in the health sector. We've galvanized our entrepreneurs even in the fashion sector, because these are, they're the ones who will manufacture the face masks, right, and ensure that there are because as we all know, there is no end in sight to the pandemic, and we need to ensure that the average African has access to PPE. So there is a need to have not just an immediate response to the pandemic, but also a long-term sustainable response. So what we're doing is we prepare, we respond, and we recover. That is the focus, and entrepreneurs are absolutely critical to this. They will create the solution to the problems that we see today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ifenwe, for that. But the two questions come to my mind, and actually some of our people online are asking that too. One is the state of digital connectivity, if you like, in Africa. So we've seen. I mean, I'm talking to you here from Lagos, and our connection is good, but it's not perfect, obviously. But also across the continent, you're talking about webinars, you're talking about engaging online. And when you were in Brussels, you said. We don't need handouts, we need a hand up in our race for better technology. Give us an idea of what it's, where will digital connectivity be, and what needs to be done to get this connections moving faster. What can we do?
So basically, what we need to do now is to ensure that there's no African left behind. So Africa right now leads the world in mobile in fintech in terms of mobile money. You have Africans who 20 years ago, there were probably about 50,000 landlines in the whole of Nigeria. Fast forward 20 years later, you have almost 70 million mobile phones in Nigeria, mobile subscribers. And so that shows that we have leapfrogged the landline technology. And giving technology to Africans is empowering Africans. So what we need to do now is to go beyond that and ensure that every African has access to internet. We're seeing with the social distancing measures that have been given by WHO that schools are all shut. So unfortunately in Africa right now, only the privileged few are able to continue their education.
Right.
Students who have access to internet at home and devices at home, but it must not be. So we need to work with governments, we need to work with development organizations as well as private sector to ensure that every African child, no matter where you are located, be it in the rural area or in the urban area, has access to internet and has access to devices so that their education can continue. And this is absolutely critical to make sure that Africans are able to be part of the digital economy and the global economy. Without the infrastructure, without the access to connectivity, we will leave half of the continent behind. And so this is probably one of the most urgent areas of investment across Africa. And government, public sector, private sector have to come together to ensure that no African is left behind.
Right, so Ifenwe, just a final question or two, really. As you know, we are in the process, Europe and Africa, of rebooting, revitalizing our partnership, our relationship, which goes back many, many decades, of course, but we're now in a new era, moving towards a real partnership where we work together on the kinds of issues that you've talked about: resilience, female empowerment, SMEs, entrepreneurship, and the point you've made just now about digital connectivity. What would you like from this new relationship, this new restart, if you like, between Africa and Europe? Where should we be focusing, really?
I think the focus should be for governments to bring in the private sector. I think that's what's been missing in the past few decades. We've had a lot done so far, but to get to where we need to get to, we need to accelerate. We need to press the throttle. And the only way to do that is to have larger private sector involvement. And I know that a lot of the policies, especially with the EU, is to deal with governments, but that we need to rethink that policy. We need to involve private sector, not just from a capacity building side, but also implementation side. And we've seen the EU already walking that path. We have a partnership in the works with the European Commission, DEFCO, led by Kunduns, and it's clear that that is the future. It's together. We've always said that the principle of Afrocapitalism states that it is the private sector that will develop Africa, but not the private sector alone, the private sector in conjunction with the development organizations and with African governments. So I think that is the one red flag that I would say is more involvement of the private sector in policy making, because we are the ones who are on the ground. We are the ones who know where the shoe pinches, and we are the ones who will impact, because the economy is driven by the private sector. And we all know that entrepreneurship is the key to eradicating poverty and to sustainable development. And I have to also mention that one of the underbellies that's been revealed with the pandemic is food security, and not just in Nigeria, but across the globe. And Africa has, the most fertile and vast land resources. what can we do to leverage the human capital, to leverage the resources that are available on this continent, and to make Africa the food basket of the world. These are the areas, tangible, concrete areas, that development organizations, private sector, and governments need to be looking at. There's a lot of work to be done, but together we can certainly reach the goal.
Thank you very much, Fenway. Is there a final message that you would like to give our global audience about what you would want in the coming months, really, from us, from all of us working together? Is there a final message you'd like to give us?
Yes, I think that what I would like all of us to leave with is, as I started, inequality is something that we must all not be okay with. As Mr. Elumelu, our founder, always says, poverty anywhere is a threat to all of us everywhere. And the world would not be what we all want it to be until we have removed inequality, until everyone, everywhere, has access to food, shelter over their heads, and decent work. This is what makes us human beings. And as long as one person anywhere on the globe lacks any of these things, we shouldn't be able to rest. So our work really is to bridge that gap and to create not just policy, but to catalyze economic growth, particularly in developing nations, through agriculture, through internet connectivity and digital connectivity. These are the things that will give us the sustainable development that we need to see, that will eradicate poverty and create Africa and Europe, for instance, should be twin continents, partners side by side, as opposed to the massive inequality that allows us to see, illegal migration from Africa into Europe, because people are looking for economic opportunity when they should have it at home. So let us create that economic opportunity on the continent. Let us create a level playing field for all citizens of the world. And let us leverage the lessons that we've learned from the pandemic to do this.
Thank you very much indeed, Fenway. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening online. It's been a pleasure, really, to talk to you, Fenway. And as you've pointed out, to so many very powerful elements of what we need to do together. And you said Africa and Europe are twin continents. That's seriously what Friends of Europe really believes in it as well. And through our different activities, initiatives, you can go on our website, you'll see how active we are, how much we're developing and investing in our relationship with Africa. You made some very powerful points. We will take them home and we will do our best to work with you, with the private sector, with policymakers, with governments, African Union, and above all, as you said, with civil society in Africa to bring these mutual challenges and deal with these mutual opportunities. So Fenway, thank you very much for joining us from Lagos, and have a good day. And see you very soon, I hope, in real time, face to face.
Thank you, Shada. Have a good day too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye.